In 1959, at the height of segregation in America, a play about an ordinary black family living in a cramped apartment opened on Broadway and permanently changed American theater. My name is Hayat Alharthi, a PhD student of English literature at Imam Muhammed bin Saud Islamic University, and today I will be discussing A Raisin in the Sun by Loraine Hansberry, exploring its literary artistry, political urgency, and enduring cultural relevance. A Raisin in the Sun was premiered on Broadway in 1959 and immediately transformed American theater. It was the first Broadway play written by a black woman, and Hansberry was only 29 years old at the time. The play ran for over 500 performances and won the New York Drama Critics Circle Award, making Hansberry the first black dramatist and the youngest playwright to receive this honor. More importantly, she portrayed authentic black family experiences to mainstream white audiences instead of presenting caricatures or stereotypes. Hansberry insisted that black domestic life was worthy of serious artistic treatment. Hansberry's work is deeply rooted in her own life. She grew up in Chicago and directly experienced housing discrimination. In 1938, her family challenged racially restrictive housing conflict in Hansberry versus Lee, a Supreme Court case that directly inspired the play's central conflict. Beyond literature, Hansberry was a political activist. She works with figures such as Paul Robeson and Du Bois and believed that art and activism were inseparable. Although she died tragically young at only 34, her work permanently altered the American literary landscape by asserting that black stories are universal stories. The title "A Raisin in the Sun" comes from Langston Hughes' poem "Harlem", which asks the haunting question, what happens to a dream deferred? Hughes in the poem offers multiple possibilities: decay, bitterness, exhaustion, or explosion. Hansberry transforms this poetic question into dramatic structure. Each member of the younger family represents a different response to deferred dreams, and it shows how racism and poverty shape human aspirations. So let's explore the thematic origins of the play. First, we have the idea of the dream deferred. Loraine Hansberry does not treat Langston Hughes' poem merely as a decorative epigraph. Instead, she uses it as the structural and philosophical core of the play. Each image in Hughes' poem, drying, festering, sagging, or exploding, corresponds to emotional and psychological states experienced by the younger family. The metaphor of the raisin in the sun suggests a dream that once had vitality but has been slowly drained by prolonged exposure to racism, poverty, and social limitations. Dreams are not destroyed outright, rather they are weakened, distorted, and made painful. More importantly, the final line, or does it explode? This frames the dramatic tension of the play. Hansberry suggests that deferred dreams carry dangerous energy. Walter's emotional collapse, his loss of money, and his eventual moral stand represent this moment of potential explosion. However, Hansberry redirects that explosive energy to ethical resistance instead of violence, and she argues that dignity can be reclaimed even when material dreams are postponed. So let's move to exploring what the $10,000 insurance check represents in the play, as it is the driving force of most of the action. While the money represents hope, it also exposes deep fractures within the family. Each character sees the check not simply as cash, but as a symbolic solution to their frustrations. Mama views it as a moral inheritance. It's something earned through her husband's life and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Walter sees it as his last chance to assert masculine authority in a society that denies him power. Beneath, on the other hand, also interpreted it as an intellectual freedom for her medical school and helping her realize herself and her identity beyond marriage. And lastly, for Ruth, she dreams of space and peace and wants a better future for her son Travis and to save her marriage. So in this play, Hansberry uses the check to show us how capitalism intensifies conflict under conditions of scarcity. When the resources are limited, dreams are forced into competition. The tragedy of the play is not simply the loss of the money, but the emotional damage caused by the system that pits family members against each other. So, what is the value and purpose of dreams? Each member of the younger family represents a distinct vision of freedom shaped by their position with intersecting systems of race, gender, and class. Walter's dream of a liquor store reflects his desire for economic autonomy and masculine identity. His fixation on money reveals how capitalist definitions of success distort self-worth, especially for black men. Beneatha's dream of becoming a doctor challenges both racial and gender expectations because her journey is not only professional but existential. She seeks to define herself outside of marriage and assimilation. Mama's dream of a house with a garden is rooted in legacy and continuity. It represents a stability, moral dignity, and the fulfillment of a shared promise with her late husband. Ruth's dream is the most understated yet most urgent. She desires space, rest, and emotional peace. Her quiet pragmatism reveals how working-class black women often carry the burden of survival without recognition. So here in the poem, the play, Hansberry's central argument is that dreams are not luxurious, they are essential to human dignity. In a society structured to deny black advancement, dreaming itself becomes an act of resistance. The play rejects the idea that oppressed people must abandon their aspirations in order to survive. Instead, Hansberry shows that deferred dreams persist, mutate, and demand expression. By the end of the play, we see the family move away from individual ambitions to a shared vision. So this shift is crucial. The youngers don't achieve wealth, but they reclaim moral agency. Hansberry thus critiques both racial injustice and materialist definitions of success. Moving on, the play explores the theme of racial discrimination and resistance. Mr. Lindler and the Claiborne Park Improvement Association represent the institutional face of racism. Lindner's politeness masks coercion, and he reveals how segregation operates through reasonable language and economic pressure rather than clear hostility. By doing so here, Hansberry exposes the hypocrisy of liberal tolerance. Lindner claims to act in everyone's interest, yet his proposal depends on the exclusion of black bodies from white spaces. This reflects the historical reality of restrictive confidence and redlining in the northern cities. As for the assimilation debate, Beneatha's ideological conflict with George Murchison dramatizes the assimilation debate within Black America. George represents wealth, education, and proximity to whiteness, yet he dismisses African heritage as irrelevant. In contrast, in this debate, we have Asage, who encourages Benitha to embrace African identity and self-definition. So, through Benitha's natural hair and rejection of Western beauty norms, Hansberry anticipates the Black is Beautiful movement and Pan-African consciousness. Hansberry here in the play doesn't represent assimilation as success, but as cultural erasure. True liberation, the play suggests, requires self-knowledge and historical awareness. Moving to Walter's moral crisis. Walter's journey is the emotional center of the play. Initially, he equates money with dignity and manhood. But when the investment fails, he reaches his lowest point and gets prepared to accept Lindra's bribe. However, Walter's final decision to reject the money represents a profound ethical awakening. He chooses communal pride over personal recovery. This moment reframes masculinity as moral courage rather than financial success. And by doing so, Hansberry argues that true manhood is defined by responsibility, not profits. Gender roles in the play. Hansberry represents gender not as a fixed role, but as a contested social position shaped by oppression. Mama exercises authority through moral wisdom rather than patriarchy. Walter's frustration reflects the damage caused by emasculation under racism, and Benitez embodies intellectual and sexual autonomy, anticipating a second wave feminism. And lastly, Ruth represents reproductive injustice, as economic hardships pushes her toward considering abortion. This play reveals how Black women experience intersectional oppression, navigating both racism and patriarchy. How does the play A Raisin in the Sun represent intimacy and the men-women relationships in general? Hansberry doesn't portray love as purely private or emotional experience. Instead, she shows how economic hardship, racial exclusion, and gender expectations directly shape emotional bonds. With Walter and Ruth's marriage, it functions as a microcosm of the broader social pressures facing Black families. Walter's frustrations stem from his inability to fulfill the culturally prescribed role of provider in a society that denies him economic success. This frustration manifests as emotional aggression and withdrawal, particularly in moments where Ruth's pragmatism contradicts with his dreams. Ruth, on the other hand, embodies quiet endurance. Her emotional restraint is not indifference, but a survival strategy developed under constant strain. Hansberry reveals how women's labor, both emotional and physical, often sustain family while remaining unacknowledged. And lastly, the crisis of Ruth's pregnancy forces both characters into vulnerability that allows them the possibility of a renewed intimacy rooted in honesty rather than ignorance. Moving to Benitez's suitor, George and Asage. Benitez's relationship with George and Asage function as ideological debates rather than conventional romantic options. Each suitor represents a competing model of Black masculinity. So with George, he embodies the assimilationist success. He is wealthy, educated, and socially accepted within white dominant structures. However, his dismissal of African American history and his expectations that Benitha conform to traditional femininity shows the limitations of his assimilation. George values Benita as a decorative companion rather than an intellectual equal, which enforces patriarchal norms. In contrast, we have Azake, who represents Pan-African consciousness and political awakening. He encourages Benita to explore her heritage and develop a self-defined identity. Importantly, Azake does not promise material comfort, instead he offers purpose and clarity. Benita's ambivalence towards his marriage proposal reflects Hansberry's refusal to provide simple resolutions. The play leaves open the question of whether liberation lies in return, reform, or reimagining the future altogether. Mama's matriarchy. Mama, or Lena Younger, embodies a form of authority that challenges both patriarchal and assimilationist frameworks. Her power is not rooted in dominance, but in moral clarity. Unlike traditional patriarchal figures, Mama does not seek control for personal validation. Her decision to purchase the house reflects an understanding of legacy and intergenerational survival. By entrusting Walter with responsibility despite his failure, of course, she teaches him the weight of ethical leadership. Hansberry represents Mama as a bridge between tradition and progress. She values faith and family while supporting Benita's education and independence. So through her, the play reimagines matriarchy as an empowering force that is capable of sustaining community under pressure. Moving on to the symbolical elements and material objects in the play, I will try to be as brief as possible in this slide. The most enduring and prevalent symbol in the poem, in the play, is Mama's plant. It represents Mama's unconditional care for her persistent dream for her family. It flourishes despite inadequate light, paralleling the family's resilience in a hostile environment. And the symbol or the image of sunlight, it represents hope, life, and opportunity. The apartment's lack of sunlight symbolizes the oppression and limited possibilities the youngers face, while the new house promises illumination. The phrase "eat your eggs" that was repeated or recurring throughout the play symbolizes the acceptance of adversity. Walter views it as a mechanism women use to stifle male ambition and temper enthusiasm with mundane reality. Benita's hair. Her transformation from straightened hair to a natural afro signals a rejection of assimilation and an embrace of African heritage. And this prefigures the Black is Beautiful movement. The house itself, the ultimate symbol of family unity and dignity. It is located in an all-white neighborhood. Thus, it represents both the realization of the collective dream and the challenge of integration. Examine the play's relationships, symbols, and ideological tensions, it becomes clear that Hansberry's themes are powerful not only because of what she says, but how she says it. Now I will focus on the realist dramatic techniques Hansberry employs to transform social critique into compelling drama. First, Hansberry employs direct colloquial language to capture authentic Black vernacular. The confined apartment setting creates a pressure cooker intensity that forces character interaction. The conflict structure. The play layers multiple types of conflict to drive the narrative, intertwining personal struggles with broader social issues. Characterization. Characters of the play are multi-dimensional, avoiding stereotypes and propaganda. Each possesses a distinct voice and internal conflict, which reveals psychological depth beyond their social roles. Lastly, the dramatic irony. Hansberry uses irony to build tension and deepen audience engagement with the character's plight. Through these techniques, Hansberry avoids reducing her characters to symbols. Instead, she presents psychologically complex individuals shaped by historical forces. So, what is the historical context and the political urgency of the play? Premiering during the Civil Rights era, the play reflects the contradictions of post-war America. While democratic ideals were celebrated globally, racial segregation persisted domestically. Hansberry exposes this hypocrisy by situating national politics within private family life. The Second Great Migration, redlining, and Cold War anxiety from the unspoken backdrop of the play, reminding the audience that personal dreams are inseparable from historical forces. So, in conclusion, A Raisin in the Sun endures because it refuses false optimism and rejects despair. Hansberry holds hope and realism in productive tension, affirming the necessity of dreams while exposing the cost of deferral. The younger family's decision to move forward, despite loss and uncertainty, models collective solidarity and moral courage. Ultimately, Hansberry argues that dignity is not granted by society, it is claimed through resistance, integrity, and the refusal to surrender one's humanity. This final slide lists the primary and secondary resources that informed my analysis, including Loraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, Langston Hughes' Harlem, and recent scholarly studies on race, gender, and class. Thank you for attention, and I welcome any questions. I hope you enjoyed my analysis.